Hello again, it's Mr. Meyer, heading on with chapter 10 of Matilda. This chapter is entitled Throwing the Hammer. If you're not familiar with the hammer, it's not the hammer that you bang on wood. This is actually something that people in competitions, Olympics, actually throw a hammer for a distance. So that is, I think it's still an Olympic event. I'm not sure, but that's what the hammer is that they're referring to, throwing the hammer. Well, the nice thing about Matilda was that if you had met her casually and talked to her, you would have thought she was a perfectly normal 5.5-year-old child. She displayed almost no outward signs of her brilliance, and she never showed off. This is a very sensible and quiet little girl, you would have said to her yourself. And unless for some reason you had started a discussion with her about literature or mathematics, you would never have known the extent of her brain power. It was therefore easy for Matilda to make friends with other children. All those in her class liked her. They knew, of course, that she was clever because they had heard her being questioned by Miss Honey on the first day of school. And they knew also that she was allowed to sit quietly with a book during lessons and not pay attention to the teacher. But children of their age do not search deeply for reasons. They are far too wrapped up in their own small struggles to worry over much about what others are doing and why. Among Matilda's newfound friends was this girl called Lavender. Right from the first day of term, the two of them started wandering around together during the morning break and in the lunch hour. Lavender was exceptionally small for her age, a skinny little nymph with deep brown eyes and with dark hair that was cut in a fringe across the forehead. Matilda liked her because she was gutsy and adventurous. She liked Matilda for exactly the same reasons. Before the first week of term was up, awesome, awesome tales about the head mistress, Miss Trunchbull, began to filter through to the newcomers. Matilda and Lavender, standing in a corner of the playground during morning break on the third day of school, were approached by a rugged 10-year-old with a boil on her nose, and her name was Hortensia. New scum, I suppose, Hortensia said to them, looking down from her great height. You know how those fifth graders are. She was eating from an extra large bag of potato crisps, that's what they call them in England, and digging the stuff out in handfuls. Welcome to Borstal, she added, spraying bits of crisp out of her mouth like snowflakes. The two tiny ones, confronted by this giant, kept a watchful silence. Have you two girls met the Trunchbull yet? Hortense asked. We've seen her at prayers, Lavender said, but we haven't met her yet. You've got a treat coming to you, Hortensia said. She hates very small children. She therefore loathes the bottom kindergarten class and everyone in it. She thinks 5-year-olds are grubs that haven't yet hatched out. In went another fistful of chips, and when she spoke again, out sprayed some more crumbs. If you survive the first year, you may just manage to live through the rest of your time here at school. But many do not survive. They get carried out on stretchers screaming. I've seen it often. Hortensia paused to observe the effect these remarks were having on the two little girls. Not very much, actually. They seemed pretty cool. So the large one decided to regale them with even further information, try to scare them more. I suppose you know the Trunchbull has a lock-up cupboard in her private quarters that's called the Chokey. Have you ever heard of the Chokey before? Matilda and Lavender shook their heads no and continued to gaze up at the giant. Being very small, they were inclined to mistrust any creature that was larger than they were, especially the senior girls. Well, Hortensia went on, the Chokey is a very tall but narrow cupboard. The floor is only 10 inches square, so you can't sit down or squat in it. You have to stand. And three of the walls are made of cement with bits of broken glass sticking out all over, so you can't lean up against them or it pokes you. You have to stand more or less at attention inside the chokey all the time when you get locked up in there. It's a terrible place. Well, can't you just lean against the door? Matilda asked. Oh, don't be daft, Hortensia said. The door's got thousands of sharp spiking nails sticking out of it. They've been hammered through from the outside, probably by the Trunchbull herself. Have you ever been in the chokey before? Lavender asked. My first year, I was in there 6 times, Hortensia said. Twice for a whole day, and the other times for 2 hours each. But 2 hours is quite bad enough. It's pitch dark in there, and you have to stand dead straight. And if you wobble at all, you get spiked either by the glass on the walls or the nails on the door. Well, why did you get put in the chokey? Matilda asked. What did you do? Well, the first time, Hortensia said, I poured half a tin of golden syrup onto the seat of the chair of the Trunchbull, that which she was going to sit on during morning prayers. It was a wonderful to see. When she lowered herself into the chair, there was a loud squelching noise similar to that made by a hippopotamus when lowering its foot into the mud on the banks of the Limpopo River. But you're too small and stupid to have read the Just So stories by Rudyard Kipling, aren't you? I've read them, Matilda said. You're a liar, Hortensia said amiably. You can't even read yet. But no matter. So when the Trunchbull sat down on the golden syrup, the squelch was beautiful. And when she jumped up again, the chair sort of stuck to the seat of those awful green pants she wears and came up with her for a few seconds until the thick syrup slowly became unstuck. Then she clasped her hands to the seat of her pants, and both hands got covered in the muck and the syrup. You should have heard her scream. But how did she know that it was you? Lavender asked. Oh, a little squirt called Ollie Bogwhistle sneaked on me and told, Hortensia said. I knocked his front teeth out. And the Trunchbull put you in the chokey for a whole day? Matilda asked, gulping. All day long, Hortensia said. I was off my rocker when she let me out. I was babbling like an idiot. What were the other things you did to get put in the chokey? Lavender asked. Oh, well, I can't remember them all now, Hortensia said. She spoke with the air of an old warrior who had been in so many battles that bravery has become commonplace to her. It's all so long, she added, stuffing more crisp into her mouth. It's also long ago. Ah, yes, I do remember another one. Here's what happened. I chose a time when I knew the Trunchbull was out of the way teaching the sixth graders, and I put up my hand and asked to go to the bogs. But instead of going there, I sneaked into the Trunchbull's room, and after a speedy search, I found the drawer where she kept all of her gym shorts. Go on, Matilda said, spellbound. What happened next? Well, I had sent away by post office, you see, for this very powerful itching powder, Hortensia said. It cost 50 pence. That's not like their cents. A packet, and was called the Skin Scorcher. The label said it was made from the powdered teeth of deadly snakes, and it was guaranteed to raise welts in the size of walnuts on your skin. So I sprinkled the stuff inside every pair of knickers in the drawer and then folded them all up again carefully. Hortensia paused to cram more crisp into her mouth as she continued the story. Well, did it work? Lavender asked. Well, Hortensia said, a few days later, during prayers, the Trunchbull suddenly started scratching herself like mad down below. Aha! I said to myself, here comes the fun. She's changed for Jim already. It was a pretty wonderful thing to be sitting there watching it all and knowing that I was the only person in the whole school who realized exactly what was going on inside the Trunchbull's pants. And I felt safe too. I knew I couldn't get caught. And then the scratching got worse on her. She couldn't stop. She must have thought she had a wasp's nest down there. And then, right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, she leapt up and grabbed her bottom and rushed out of the room. Both Matilda and Lavender were enthralled with the story. It was quite clear to them that they were at this moment standing in the presence of a master. Here was somebody who had brought the art of skullduggery to the highest point of perfection, somebody, moreover, who was willing to risk life and limb in pursuit of her calling. They gazed in wonder at this goddess, and suddenly, even the boil on her nose was no longer a blemish but a badge of courage. But then how did she catch you that time? Lavender asked, breathless with wonder. She didn't catch me, Hortensia said, but I got a day in the chokey anyway, just the same. Why? They both asked. The Trunchbull, Hortensia said, has a nasty habit of guessing. When she doesn't know who the culprit is, she makes a guess at it, and the trouble is, she's often right. I was the prime suspect this time because of the golden syrup incident. And although I knew she didn't have any proof, nothing I said made any difference. I kept shouting, "How could I have done it, Miss Trunchbull? I didn't even know you kept any spare shorts at school. I don't even know what itching powder is. I've never heard of it." But the line didn't help me, in spite of the great performance I put on. The Trunchbull simply grabbed me by one ear and rushed me to the chokey on the double and threw me inside and locked the door. That was my second all day stretch. That was torturous. I was spiked and cut all over when I came out. "Sounds like it's a war around here," Matilda said, overawed. "You're darn right it's a war," Hortensia cried, "and the casualties around here are terrific. We are the Crusaders, the gallant army fighting for our lives with hardly any weapons at all, and the Trunchbull is the Prince of Darkness, the foul serpent, the fiery dragon, with all the weapons at her command. It's a tough life at school here. We all try to support each other." "Well, you can rely on us," Lavender said, making her height of 3 foot 2 inches stretch as far as possible. "No, I can't," Hortensia said. "You're only shrimps. But you never know. We may find a use for you one day in some undercover job." "Tell us just a little bit more about what she does," Matilda said, "but please do." "I mustn't frighten you before you've been here even a week at school," Hortensia said. "Oh, you won't frighten us," Lavender said. "We may be small, but we're pretty tough." "Well, listen to this story then," Hortensia said. "Only yesterday, the Trunchbull caught a boy called Julius Rotwinkle eating licorice during the scripture lesson, and she simply just picked him up by one arm and flung him clear out of the open classroom window. Our classroom is one floor up, and we saw Julius Rotwinkle go sailing out over the garden like a frisbee and landing with a thump in the middle of the lettuces. Then the Trunchbull turned to us and said, 'From now on, anybody caught eating in class goes straight out the window.'" "Did this Julius Rotwinkle break any bones?" Lavender asked. "Only a few bones," Hortensia said. "You've got to remember that the Trunchbull once threw the hammer for Britain in the Olympics, so she's very proud of her right arm." "What's throwing the hammer?" Lavender asked. "The hammer," Hortensia said, "is actually a ruddy great cannonball on the end of a long bit of wire, and the thrower whisks it around and around his or her head faster and faster, and then lets it go. You have to be terrifically strong. The Trunchbull will throw anything around just to keep her arm in shape. Especially she'll throw children." And by the way, here's a picture of Julius. He's got a good arc as he's going out the window there, huh? At least he landed in the lettuce patch. "Good heavens," Lavender said. "I once heard her say," Hortensia won, "that a large boy is about the same weight as the Olympic hammer, and therefore he's very useful for practicing with." At that point, something strange happened. The playground, which up to then had been filled with shrieks and the shouting of children at play, all at once became silent as the grave. "Watch out," Hortensia whispered. Matilda and Lavender glanced around and saw the gigantic figure of Miss Trunchbull advancing through the crowd of boys and girls with menacing strides. The children drew back hastily to let her through, and her progress across the asphalt was like that of Moses going through the Red Sea when the waters parted. A formidable figure she was, too, in her belted smock and her green breeches. Below the knees, her calf muscles stood like grapefruits inside her stockings. "Amanda Thrip!" she was shouting. "You, Amanda Thrip, come here!" "Hold your hats," Hortensia whispered. "Why, what's going to happen?" Lavender whispered back. "That idiot Amanda," Hortensia said, "has let her long hair grow even longer during the holidays, and her mother has plaited it into pigtails. Silly thing to do around here." "Why are pigtails silly?" Matilda asked. "If there's one thing the Trunchbull can't stand, it's pigtails," Hortensia said. So Matilda and Lavender saw the giant in green breeches advancing upon the small girl of about 10 who had a pair of plaited golden pigtails hanging over her shoulders. Each pigtail had a pretty blue satin bow at the end of it, and it looked all very nice. The girl wearing the pigtails, Amanda Thrip, stood quite still, watching the advancing giant coming at her, and the expression on her face was one that you might find of the face of a person who is trapped in a small field with an enraged bull which is charging flat out towards her. The girl was glued to the spot, terror struck, pop eyed, quivering, knowing for certain that the day of judgment had come for her at last. Miss Trunchbull had now reached the victim and stood towering over her. I want those filthy pigtails off tomorrow before you come back to school, she barked. Chop them off and throw them in the garbage. You understand me? Amanda, paralyzed with fright, managed to stutter, My mommy likes them. She plates them for me every morning. Your mummy's a twit, the Trunchbull bellowed. She pointed a finger the size of a salami at the child's head and shouted, You look like a rat with a tail coming out of its head. My mummy thinks I look lovely, Miss Trunchbull. Amanda stuttered, shaking like a blanc mange, which I don't know what that is. I have to look that up. I don't give a tinker's toot what your mummy thinks, the Trunchbull yelled. And with that, she lunged forward, grabbed a hold of Amanda's pigtails in her right fist, and lifted the girl clear off the ground. And then she started swinging her around and around her head, faster and faster. And Amanda was screaming blue murder, and the Trunchbull was yelling, I'll give you pigtails, you little rat! Shades of the Olympics, Hortensia murmured. She's getting up speed now, just like she does with the hammer. 10 to 1, she's going to throw her. And now the Trunchbull was leaning back against the weight of the whirling girl and pivoting expertly on her toes, spinning around and around, and soon Amanda Thripp was traveling so fast she became a blur, and suddenly with a mighty grunt, the Trunchbull let go of the pigtails, and Amanda went sailing like a rocket right over the wire fence of the playground, high up into the sky. And there is her practicing her hammer toss with poor Amanda. Yikes. Well thrown, sir! Someone shouted from across the playground, and Matilda, who was mesmerized by the whole crazy affair, saw Amanda Thripp descending in a long, graceful parabola on the playing field beyond. She landed on the grass and bounced 3 times and finally came to rest. Then, amazingly, she sat up. She looked a trifle dazed, and who could blame her? But after a minute or so, she was on her feet again and tottering back towards the playground. The Trunchbull stood in the playground, dusting off her hands. Not bad, she said, considering I'm not in a strict training mode. Not bad at all. And then she strode away. She's crazy, Hortensia said. But don't the parents complain to the school? Matilda asked. Would yours? Hortensia asked. I know mine wouldn't. She treats the mothers and fathers just the same as she treats the children, and everybody's afraid of her, scared to death of her. I'll be seeing you guys around sometime, you two. And with that, Hortensia sauntered away. End of chapter 10. Life at school. Have a good day.